In November of 2014, a 47-year-old hiker from Las Vegas named Kenny Veach walked into the desert mountains northeast of the city to find a cave. Not just any cave, a cave he had stumbled across months earlier near the perimeter of Nellis Air Force Base, a cave with an entrance shaped like a perfect capital letter M. He said that when he approached it, his entire body began to vibrate. The closer he got, the worse it became. He got scared and ran. He posted about it on YouTube. The internet called him a liar and dared him to go back. So he did.
My mission today is to just do a one-day hike. It's about a 10-hour hike. I got to still go over another ridge and then go all the way down a big crevice that's real narrow and gets kind of scary. So I'm going to go check out my map and find out how far I hiked just now. Let's see what time it is.
He packed a 9mm handgun, told his family he would be gone overnight, and drove his white Honda CR-V to a trailhead in the Sheep Range. 12 days later, search and rescue volunteers found his cell phone sitting on the ground next to a vertical abandoned mineshaft. It had not been dropped. It appeared to have been placed there. His body was never found. The mine was searched. He was not inside. Kenny Veach had simply ceased to exist. Nevada is home to nearly 200,000 abandoned mines. The State Division of Minerals estimates that at least 50,000 of them are classified as dangerous, meaning they pose an immediate risk to human life. At the current rate of funding, which is roughly $1.5 million a year, it will take another century to finish sealing them. Most of these mines have never been inventoried. Nobody knows how deep they go. Nobody knows what is inside them. But the Western Shoshone and Paiute people, who have lived on this land for thousands of years, have always known. They have names for what lives underground. They have stories about wars fought against things that came out of the caves, and they have been warning us not to go in. In this episode, we are going to look at the disappearance of Kenny Veach and the vibrating cave near Area 51 that nobody has been able to find since the ancient war the Paiute say they fought against cannibalistic beings sealed beneath a cave in northern Nevada, and why the United States government tried to turn a sacred Shoshone mountain into a nuclear waste dump without telling anyone. You will not want to miss this one. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Thanks. To understand what happened to Kenny Veach, you first have to understand the kind of person he was. Kenny was born in 1967 and had lived in Las Vegas his entire life. He was not a casual weekend hiker. He was an obsessive solo explorer who spent days at a time walking through the most remote and dangerous terrain in the Mojave and Great Basin deserts. He documented his adventures on a small YouTube channel under the handle SnakeBitMG, and the name was not ironic. He had been bitten by rattlesnakes more than once and considered it part of the experience. He collected animal bones, desert glass, old mining relics, anything he could find, and he brought them all home to decorate his house. His living room looked like a natural history museum curated by someone who was not entirely concerned with personal safety. Professionally, Kenny had recently left his job as a service technician for a coffee equipment company. He was trying to reinvent himself as an inventor. He had designed what he believed was a superior toilet paper holder and submitted it to the television show Shark Tank. He was also trying to sell his house, but with an unusual condition. The buyer had to agree to hire him as the live-in caretaker and let him keep decorating. By all accounts, he was an eccentric, intelligent, physically capable man who knew the desert better than almost anyone. In his own words, he once wrote online, "I solo hike across mountaintops that most people would not dare go. I have been in more caves than I can count. I play with rattlesnakes for fun. But this one particular cave was beyond anything I had ever encountered. That cave was somewhere in the Sheep Range, a rugged limestone mountain chain that rises out of the desert about 25 miles northeast of Las Vegas. The range sits just east of the Nellis Air Force Base boundary. Nellis itself is enormous, covering more than 2.9 million acres of restricted airspace and desert terrain. The Nevada test site, where the United States government detonated over 900 nuclear weapons between 1951 and 1992, borders the area to the northwest. Area 51 is roughly 50 miles from where Kenny hiked. This is not wilderness in the way most people think of it. This is land that has been irradiated, bombed, tested, and sealed off for the better part of a century. The government has been putting things underground here for decades, and yet there are things underground here that predate the government by a very long time. Now, Kenny's story first entered the public record in late 2014, when he left a comment on a YouTube video titled "Son of an Area 51 Technician," uploaded by a group called Serious Disclosure that covers UFO and extraterrestrial phenomena. The video itself was fairly standard conspiracy content, but Kenny's comment stood out from the noise because it was specific. He wrote that during one of his hikes near the base, he had found a hidden cave. The entrance was shaped like a perfect capital M. He always entered every cave he found, but as he began to enter this particular one, his whole body began to vibrate. The closer he got to the entrance, the worse the vibrating became. He got scared and left. The comment went viral almost immediately. Thousands of people responded. Some were fascinated. Most called him a liar. They demanded proof. They wanted video. They wanted coordinates. And then there was one commenter who said something different. This person wrote a warning that would later become one of the most unsettling details of the entire case. The comment read, "No, do not go back there. If you find that cave entrance, do not go in. You will not get out." Now, I want to pause here because I think about that comment a lot. Was it just someone being dramatic on the internet? Probably. People say things like that all the time in conspiracy forums. But given what happened next, it is hard not to read it differently in hindsight. Kenny responded to his critics by uploading a video titled "M Cave Hike," in which he returned to the general area to find the cave again. He hiked for hours through brutal terrain, scrambling over jagged limestone ridges and loose scree fields at elevations above 6,000 feet. The temperature was extreme, the landscape was barren, and he did not find the M-shaped entrance. The cave, if it existed, had effectively vanished. But there was something in the footage that viewers picked up on. The desert was unnaturally quiet. If you have spent any time hiking in Nevada, you know that even the harshest environments have ambient sound. Wind through creosote bush, the buzz of insects, the chatter of a rock wren. Something. But in Kenny's footage, there was a distinct absence of wildlife sound. Experienced outdoors people noticed this immediately. That kind of silence is typically associated with the presence of a large predator in the area, something that causes every other living thing to go still. Or it is associated with something that does not have a convenient biological explanation. Unsatisfied with the failed second trip, and goaded relentlessly by online commenters who continued to call him a fraud, Kenny announced he would go back a third time. This time, he said, he would bring a GoPro and document everything. On the morning of November 10th, 2014, he told his family he was heading out for a short overnight hike. He packed his 9mm handgun, water, and basic supplies. He drove his white Honda CR-V to a trailhead at the base of the Sheep Range, and he walked into the mountains. He never came back. His family waited 2 days before reporting him missing. The Nevada Red Rock Search and Rescue Team launched an extensive air and ground operation across the Sheep Range. The search commander was a man named Dave Cummings, and his teams combed the ridgelines, canyons, and washes for any sign of Kenny. They found his car exactly where he had parked it, at the trailhead. They tracked his general direction of travel into the mountains. And on November 22nd, 12 days after he had disappeared, they found his cell phone. It was sitting on the ground near the opening of a deep, vertical, abandoned mine shaft. Not at the bottom of the shaft, not wedged in a crack where it might have fallen during a struggle. It was on the surface, positioned near the edge, as though someone had deliberately set it down. Dave Cummings told reporters at the time that they could not find another trail beyond the phone. They had tracked Kenny as far as they could, and the tracks simply ended at that mine shaft. Specialists were called in to explore the shaft itself. They found nothing. No body, no pack, no gun, no GoPro. Just an empty hole in the ground and a dead cell phone. In the weeks that followed, Kenny's girlfriend, a woman named Sharion, came forward on his YouTube channel. She left a long comment that painted a more complicated picture. She said that Kenny had struggled with depression for many years and that it had worsened in the months before his disappearance. She said he had once told her that if he ever decided to take his own life, no one would ever find him. She also pointed out something that nobody had caught yet. Kenny did not bring his video camera on this final hike. Despite telling the internet he would film everything with a GoPro, he left it behind. Sharion believed he had no intention of documenting anything. She believed he left his phone near the mine shaft so he could not be tracked. She believed he had walked into the desert to die. Now, I have to be honest with you. The depression explanation is plausible. It is the explanation that makes the most conventional sense, and I am not going to dismiss it. But it does not explain everything. It does not explain the vibration. It does not explain why the M-shaped cave entrance has never been found by anyone else, despite multiple YouTubers and hikers searching the same area in the years since. Some of them claim to have located a cave matching the description, only to be unable to find it again on a return trip. It does not explain the proximity to one of the most secretive military installations on the planet, and it does not explain why the desert went silent in his footage. Kenny Veach vanished near a mine shaft in mountains where hundreds of abandoned mines honeycomb the ground beneath the surface. But long before any prospector dug those mines, long before any military base was built on this land, the people who lived here for thousands of years had already mapped what was underground, and they had a very different explanation for what was hiding in those caves. About 300 miles north of where Kenny Veach disappeared, near the small town of Lovelock in Pershing County, Nevada, there is a cave in the Humboldt Range that the Paiute people have been telling stories about for longer than anyone can accurately measure. The cave is roughly 150 feet long, about 35 feet wide, and it sits at the base of a rocky hillside overlooking what was once the shoreline of ancient Lake Laonton, a massive inland sea that covered much of northern Nevada during the last ice age. Today, the lake is gone. The desert floor is cracked and dry, but the cave is still there. And so are the warnings. The Paiute and Western Shoshone peoples of the Great Basin share an oral tradition that predates European contact by centuries, possibly millennia. They speak of an older race that inhabited this land before them. These beings were called the Saiteika. The name is sometimes translated as Tule Eaters, a reference to the tule reeds they supposedly used to build rafts for crossing the remnants of the ancient lake. but the name is misleading, because according to the oral history, the thing the Si Te Ka were most known for eating was not reeds, it was people. The Si Te Ka were described consistently across multiple tribal accounts as tall, significantly taller than the Paiute, with red or reddish hair, pale skin, and an aggressive, predatory intelligence. They were not spirits. They were not metaphors. The Paiute described them as flesh and blood beings who lived underground in cave systems that ran beneath the mountains of northern Nevada. They emerged to hunt, and what they hunted was human. One of the most detailed records of this oral tradition comes from a woman named Sarah Winnemucca. Sarah was the daughter of a Paiute chief named Winnemucca, and she became one of the first Native American women to publish a book in English. Her autobiography, Life Among the Paiutes, was published in 1883 and remains one of the most important primary sources of Paiute history. In it, and in her public lectures across the United States, she described the Si Te Ka as cannibals who terrorized her people for generations. According to the account she preserved, the Paiute eventually reached a breaking point. They organized a coalition with neighboring tribes, and together they waged a coordinated campaign to drive the Si Te Ka from the surface. They pushed the surviving beings into a cave. They piled brush and timber at the entrance, and they set it on fire. The Paiute were very specific about which cave this was. They pointed to a site in the Humboldt Range, near what would later become the town of Lovelock. They said the Si Te Ka were sealed inside. They said the fire had killed most of them, and they said that the cave should not be entered. For thousands of years, that warning was respected. And then, in 1911, two men came along who had not heard the warning, or more likely, did not care. Their names were David Pugh and James Hart, and they were not archaeologists. They were guano miners. Bat guano, which is bat excrement that accumulates in caves over centuries, was a valuable commodity at the time because it could be sold as agricultural fertilizer. Pugh and Hart had secured a contract to excavate guano from the cave near Lovelock, and they began digging. For several years, they hauled out ton after ton of bat droppings, going deeper and deeper into the cave floor. And as they dug, they started finding things that were not guano. They found woven baskets of extraordinary craftsmanship. They found weapons. They found duck decoys made from bundled tulle reeds and real feathers, designed to float on water and lure birds within hunting range. These decoys would later be dated to roughly 2,000 years old, making them among the oldest ever discovered in North America. And they found human remains, bones, skulls, and in some cases, partially preserved soft tissue kept intact by the dry cave environment for centuries. Word got out. In 1912, the University of California sent an archaeologist named Llewellyn Loud to formally excavate the site. Loud, and later a researcher named Mark Harrington, documented thousands of artifacts from the cave. The collection was enormous, but among the remains, they noted something that did not fit the standard narrative. Some of the skeletal remains appeared to belong to individuals who were significantly taller than the average Paiute of the region. And several early excavators reported finding strands of red or reddish-brown hair still attached to skulls and preserved in the dry air of the cave. Artifacts from Lovelock Cave were distributed across institutions. The Smithsonian received a portion. The Museum of the American Indian received others. Some remains were eventually repatriated to the tribes. Others remain in museum storage to this day. Now, the mainstream archaeological position on the red hair is straightforward. They say it is the result of a natural chemical process in which dark, pigmented hair loses melanin over thousands of years of exposure to alkaline cave sediments, causing it to shift toward a reddish-brown hue. The taller remains are categorized as statistical outliers, individuals who happen to be above average height, and the oral tradition of the Siteka is classified as mythology. Interesting mythology, they will grant you. Culturally significant mythology, but mythology nonetheless. And this is where I have to step in with my own thoughts, because this is the part that bothers me. The Paiute did not present the Siteka as a myth. They presented it as history. They specified the exact cave. They described the beings in consistent physical detail across multiple tribal accounts spanning generations. They described the war, the method of sealing, and the reason for the warning. And then, when outsiders finally went to that exact cave and started digging, they found human remains, evidence of fire, and physical characteristics that aligned with the oral description. I am not going to sit here and tell you that there were cannibalistic red-haired giants living in Nevada. That is not my job. My job is to show you the evidence and let you draw your own conclusions. But what I will say is this. The Paiute told us exactly where to look. They told us what we would find. And when we looked, we found it. At some point, you have to ask yourself whether calling something a myth is an explanation or just a way of avoiding one. The Paiute sealed beings inside a cave and told everyone to stay away. That is one kind of sealing. But the United States government has been doing its own kind of sealing in Nevada for decades. And when they tried to open a mountain that the Western Shoshone had been guarding for centuries, it triggered a fight that is still going on today. Yucca Mountain sits in Nye County, Nevada, about 100 miles northwest of Las Vegas. It is a low, flat-topped volcanic ridge rising out of the desert on the western edge of the Nevada test site. To most Americans, if they have heard of it at all, it is the place where the government wanted to store nuclear waste. To the Western Shoshone, it is something else entirely. Under the Treaty of Ruby Valley, signed in 1863, the Western Shoshone agreed to allow safe passage through their territory and to permit some mining activity. But the treaty explicitly stated that the Shoshone retained ownership of the land. They never ceded it. They never sold it. They signed an agreement that allowed coexistence, not surrender. The United States government has disputed this interpretation for over 160 years, but the Shoshone have never wavered. As far as they are concerned, the land is theirs, and Yucca Mountain is sacred. For the Shoshone, the mountain is not just a geographic feature. It is connected to their understanding of the underground world, the same underground world that appears in Paiute oral traditions, the same underground world that honeycomb caves and tunnels run through across the entire Great Basin. The Shoshone used caves in this region for burial of their dead. Rock art sites throughout the surrounding area mark places of spiritual power. The mountain sits in a landscape that has been used for ceremony, vision quests, and spiritual practice for thousands of years. There is a reason the Shoshone treat these underground spaces with reverence. They believe they are inhabited. In 1987, the United States Congress passed the Nuclear Waste Policy Amendments Act, which designated Yucca Mountain as the sole site for a permanent underground nuclear waste repository in the entire country. The plan was to bore tunnels deep into the volcanic rock and entomb 77,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel inside the mountain. This material would remain lethally radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years. To put that in perspective, 200,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans had not yet left Africa. The waste they plan to store in this mountain will still be dangerous, long after every civilization currently on Earth has turned to dust. The Western Shoshone were not consulted. The tribe learned about the plan through news reports. When tribal leaders objected, citing both the Treaty of Ruby Valley and the spiritual significance of the site, the federal government told them the land belonged to the United States. The Shoshone said it did not. The government said it did. And then the Department of Energy began boring a 5-mile exploratory tunnel into the heart of the mountain. Now, I need to point out the irony here, because it is staggering. The United States government was willing to spend billions of dollars to drill a new hole into a sacred mountain, fill it with the most dangerous material humans have ever created, and seal it shut for the next 250,000 years. Meanwhile, 50,000 dangerous abandoned mines across the state of Nevada sit wide open because the government cannot find $400 million to close them. Let me give you the numbers. The Nevada Division of Minerals runs the Abandoned Mine Lands program. It was created in the 1980s specifically to identify and seal hazardous mines on public land. The program's administrator, a man named Rob Giglieri, has said publicly that Nevada contains approximately 200,000 abandoned mining features. Some estimates from the division put the number as high as 300,000. Of those, at least 50,000 are classified as posing a significant hazard to human life. That means shafts that drop hundreds of feet without warning, tunnels with unstable ceilings that can collapse from the vibration of a footstep, toxic gas pockets that displace oxygen so quietly you do not realize you are suffocating until you are already on the ground. Old dynamite so degraded that it can detonate if you step on it. Since the program started, they have inventoried roughly half the state. At their current pace and funding level, which averages about $1.5 million per year, Giglieri has estimated it will take another 100 years to finish. He told the Nevada Independent that the program needs approximately $400 million to complete the job. They do not receive a single dollar from the state general fund. The entire operation runs on mining claim fees and surface disturbance fees, which fluctuate from year to year. In fiscal year 2020, their budget was $885,000 for a state with 50,000 dangerous holes in the ground. Since 1961, which is as far back as the state keeps records, there have been 19 reported human deaths and 24 injuries in Nevada's abandoned mines. That is the official number. But the division also acknowledges that many of these mines are in areas so remote that incidents go unreported. People walk into the desert, step into a shaft that has been hidden by sagebrush for a century, and nobody ever knows what happened to them. They are simply gone, missing hikers, missing off-roaders, missing explorers. Another name on a list that gets shorter every year as people stop looking. The first mine abandoned in Nevada was in 1857, just outside Las Vegas. The first mining death in the state came 4 years later in 1861 in Story County, when a man and his horse both fell down a 100-foot shaft. That was 165 years ago, and we are still not done cleaning up the mess. As for Yucca Mountain, the project was technically halted in 2010 under the Obama administration, but it was never formally decommissioned. The 5-mile tunnel that the Department of Energy bored into the mountain is still there. The infrastructure is still there. And as recently as 2018, there were congressional efforts to revive the project and begin accepting waste. The Western Shoshone continue to oppose it. They have never stopped opposing it. Under the Treaty of Ruby Valley, they maintain that the mountain belongs to them. The government maintains that it does not, and the tunnel sits empty inside the rock, waiting. I do not know what Kenny Veach found in the sheep range. I do not know what made his body vibrate at the entrance of a cave that nobody has been able to locate since. I do not know what the Paiute sealed inside Lovelock Cave thousands of years ago, or whether the things they described are still down there in some form. And I do not know what the Western Shoshone have been guarding at Yucca Mountain for centuries, or why they believe the underground is inhabited. But I do know this. Nevada has 200,000 abandoned mines, and we have no idea what is inside most of them. The state cannot afford to look. The government does not want to look. And the people who were here first, who mapped this land and named these mountains, and lived alongside whatever is underneath them for thousands of years, have been telling us the same thing the entire time. Stay out. Maybe we should start listening. And because you made it this far, comment "stay out" below so I know who made it to the end and who did not. If you enjoy content like this, where we deep dive into true strange cases involving the unexplained indigenous knowledge and what is really hiding beneath the surface, make sure you subscribe right now. I love you all, and I will see you in the next one.